I've never done an abortion, and I never will. I entered medicine in order to help women and deliver life into the world. I lived my professional life guided by the ancient principles of medical ethics. Primum non nocere, first do no harm. This means that a doctor can sometimes cure, but will always be there to offer care, compassionate care. Abortion is the intentional destruction of life. It is that bullet that is fired. And the intentional destruction of life is the opposite of the basic principles of medical ethics. The current debate over the 8th Amendment has become a debate over maternal health care. The Constitution protects the right to life of the mother and the unborn child. In practice for me, this means I'm fully protected, doing everything medically to save both lives in an emergency. It has not always been possible to save the baby, but I have never felt that the law prevented me from doing my best to protect both my patients. Many of my colleagues agree with this conclusion. Over the years, I've been presented with almost every conceivable scenario: premature births, late births, complicated deliveries, and ill mothers and babies. I and my team work hard to ensure the best possible outcome, no matter how complicated the circumstances. Despite funding shortages and cutbacks in services, we delivered world-class maternal health care in this country. Of course, we should always aim to be the best, and we can always improve. But I am proud that Ireland is constantly ranked amongst the safest countries in the world for pregnant women by the World Health Organization. Based on the latest figures, we are safer than any European countries that allow abortion. However, these days, every time I open a paper or turn on the radio, I hear politicians saying that Ireland is not a safe place. Politicians are always pushing some agenda to gain support in the media or with interest groups, so I largely ignore them. However, some doctors have argued in the media that the introduction of abortion is necessary to allow them to protect women and save lives. This is simply incorrect. As an obstetrician, currently I am not prevented from protecting women and saving lives. The suggestion that Irish hospitals are unsafe because of our laws is ridiculous and completely untrue. I have seen the government's proposed legislation to be passed if they win the referendum. I cannot see any part of it that this would improve healthcare in Irish maternity hospitals. In fact, the Minister of Health, Simon Harris, has proposed to copy Britain and introduce abortion for the physical or mental health of the woman under the British Abortion Act. Over 97% of abortions are performed for mental health reasons. I fear that if the 8th Amendment is removed from the Constitution, the issue of abortion will become a political football, with Minister Harris and the Dáil changing the terms and limits based on whatever deal they've made with potential coalition parties. This means that maternity care will become more politicised, not less, with pressure coming from pro-abortion lobbying groups to amend and change the legislation. If we look at the UK and the US, the introduction of abortion into the law has made the issue more controversial and a permanent part of politics. This is why, and I and many other obstetricians will be voting no on May 25th.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hayes. Now, we've heard the four speakers, four excellent speakers, different areas of the proposal. Now we'll turn it over to the floor for anybody who would like to ask a question from the panel. Tim, yep.
I'd just like to ask Dr. Hayes.
Yeah.
What does Dr. Hayes what does he think the impact of the smear testing, the backdrop to the run into the referendum, what impact is that having, say, on the voting or on the electorate, if you like?
The smear testing debacle really occurred because when a lady attends an American gynecologist, they attend yearly, and they get a full pap smear smeared yearly. So when it was adopted in Ireland, we followed the NHS system, which is every 3 years. So there was a window where people got missed because of the American system. Now, we have this open disclosure. When a doctor makes a mistake, he puts his hands up. What you can never ever do is lose the trust of the patient. And if a patient knows you're being honest and forthright, she will stay with you. When the health system realised their mistakes, they weren't accountable. They fudged, they hid it under the carpet. And that's what our Irish government is, my friend. And I suspect if no occurs, I think the government's going to fall. Amen.
Gentlemen, yeah.
Yeah, please excuse me for reading this. But, okay. I'd like to thank the panel for everything they said, especially the lady. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you brought a tear to my eye. So my question is this: is it not strange that at the time the government was deciding to call a referendum to repeal the Eighth Amendment, thus depriving unborn persons of the right to life, EU lawmakers were considering giving personhood to AI artifacts? Is this a coincidence? And if not a coincidence, what does the near future hold for human beings in Ireland?
Well, you see, this is all crept up on us, and we have been, because we have a media that is fundamentally ideological and corrupted in all the normal senses. I mean, corrupted in the senses that it doesn't exist or doesn't perceive itself to exist in order to tell us what is true and to give us the means to discuss this among ourselves, but to actually impose upon us a particular view, which seems to be in many respects neurotic, in that one of its primary objectives is to destroy what is already perceived to be true. That seems to be the fundamental driving force of this ideology. And it's more complicated than that, but that's certainly the case. So when you apply that, you see that many of the proposals that are coming before us now are completely mutually incoherent and intrinsically incoherent very often. You have, for example, proposals that we require gender balance, but then they tell us, well, at the last count that there were 72 different genders. So we only need gender balance for one of those. Is that right? And if you say, well, actually now I understand that there's no such thing as gender at all, and that in fact I can just get a piece of paper which will say that I'm a woman, and if you say that I'm not, I can have you arrested for something. Right? At the same time, so this seems to me to be, for example, a perfect solution to the problem that political parties have in finding enough female candidates. You just give dresses and cards to people that are what you describe is again the same thing. I mean, it's very interesting if you actually look into the electorate. The same thing is kind of there. I've actually noticed that there's a high representation of vegans and people who are opposed to fox hunting and other such activities who are pro-choice. In other words, they have no difficulties.
Well, I'm a vegan and I'm against fox hunting
That's
and
fine,
all
yeah.
animal cruelty.
I'm sure that's true. But I can tell you that there are a lot of vegans on the other side.
Well, there's compassion for animals as well.
Madrada, please.
Yes, yeah, but
Leave John answer the question. We don't want
of
any
course there's
interruptions.
compassion for animals, but I think before compassion for animals comes compassion for human beings. And that's the point I'm making. I'm making the point about an incoherent ideology which is taking over our society. And these are parts of it. And the one you describe, sir, is again, it's a pretty absurd one in many respects, but I can guarantee you that we're moving towards a new robot culture in which robots will be given human rights and they will develop supposed relationships with human beings, and they would be entitled to marry human beings and marry human beings. This is the meaning of all of the stuff that's been happening for us here, particularly in the last 5 years, constitutionally, because those 5 articles I talked about represented a massive impediment to all this, because they were the actual fundamental human rights of human beings. And a sledgehammer has already been taken to 2 of these articles, Article 41 and 42, in 2 referendums, one in 2012 and another in 2015. This one is to Article 40, and it's the first blow. If it succeeds, it is the first blow, but it is a blow that will become a precedent in our jurisprudence, because it will mean that the court will be able to say, well, in a previous referendum it was accepted by the people that a right of a human category of human person could be struck down. And so this is a pattern. I've been trying, I'm not saying this in a sort of self-congratulatory way or complaining, as it were, being plaintive about it. I'm just saying that I saw this I didn't see it all, to be honest. I just had I saw a glimmer of it and thought, there's something wrong here in 2012. I saw this developing in 2011, and I see it really, really strongly now. But I was alone virtually in the media. Myself and Bruce Arnold were the only voices really in the Irish media who were consistently pointing these things out. And now we have 3 out of 5 articles, which will be, if this happens, which will be disabled. And will no longer have any of the meanings that were placed there in 37 by very clever people who understood the nature of human interactions, human relationships, and human limits. And so, this is what I mean by totalitarian. This is, we're entering into a whole new phase of our history. And I would say that the mindset that governs this, if governance is the right word, is one of recklessness.
Sorry, I meant to but in the position paper that the EU published, they say it's from the humanist values,
yeah,
which is atheistic materialism.
It is.
And so it is totalitarian, as you say.
Yes, it's a mimicry of the impression you would have from Christian civilization without understanding what it was.
Sorry, that's a very interesting point, but just actually in relation to that, I seen a letter in the Irish Independent, say maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and it was basically jackdaws will have more rights than the unborn. And it said, I'll just read this, it's just a short letter, and it just, I discovered today that jackdaws have a nest in my chimney. There may be eggs in the nest. Under the Wildlife Acts, it would be illegal for me to disturb this nest, and I agree with this. However, if the government gets its way over the 8th Amendment, there will be protection for unborn jackdaws in Ireland, but no for protection for unborn humans. Reverend from Wicklow.
Yeah, Father Katie.
Father, I beg your pardon. Father Katie Doyle. Excellent letter.
In reply to those comments by, I think, John Motors, you're right in what you said about all the evil has come in our country because of, we've forgotten God. And, I thank all the speakers for your talks, they were excellent. It's certainly worth coming here tonight. But in relation to the comments regarding animals, Pope Francis in Laudato Si has said, please just let me finish the brief point. Please let me finish the question to the panel. Well, please let me finish the brief point.
Very quick.
He's in Laudato Si, which Pope Francis says clearly in it that it's now part of the official teaching of the Catholic Church. He says, unconcern for other creatures is tyrannical anthropocentrism, and anthropocentrism is regarding humankind as the centre of existence. And he also says that it's the same heart that deals with an animal as deals with a person. And fox hunting is barbaric, but that's only, I know this isn't the issue, so we're all on the same side.
John will answer that.
No, look, I don't want any, it's just a comment.
I would like to answer.
Okay, well, I don't want to get into an argument with you. We're all on the same side.
I'm not getting into an argument. I just want to make a very clear point. You have reminded me of something. I think, which I think is very important. Yes, I have heard what the Pope has to say about these matters. And I hope that in the next week, the Pope in Rome makes a similar statement in relation to the rights of human children.
If it is now known that the nervous system of the baby starts at 10 weeks and is there at 12 weeks, all these abortions that will occur will cause pain to the babies. So we can say that babies are going to be tortured in the womb. Am I right?
Yes.
If you think about it, the fetal heart beats at 22 days. We go through life, and life is a continuum. And when we leave this mortal world, the doctor listens to your heart when it stops, and he writes your death cert. So therefore, for me, life begins at conception, but we do follow the heart all the way through. The heart is completely functional at 12 weeks. The brain and the nervous system is functional. You may have remembered there was a comment about a yawn. The yawn was very irritable to the other side because it was a facial expression. And a facial expression is humanity. And they have to deny humanity.
So the children are not given an anaesthetic to deal with any pain
No.
because they're thrown in the bin.
Yeah, they're revulsed from the womb, piece by piece. The unkindness of cuts.
It can't feel pain, as you say?
Yes.
Hello?
We'll Joan first, then you get.
I was speaking recently with a medical doctor who said to me that Ireland, if this is passed, we may in fact be voting for abortion on demand up to 14 weeks. He tells me, and I'm sure the doctor maybe will clarify, the ultrasounds, he said, can be 2 weeks either way. So somebody may in fact be 14 weeks and not necessarily 12 weeks, that's correct. Could we be legalising abortion on demand up to 14 weeks instead of 12, based on the ultrasound?
9 months. 9 months.
So yeah, ultrasounds. So basically, Simon Harris is wanting this to be a GP-led service without any consultation with the ICGP or any GPs in any way, shape, or form. And it's actually not just up to 12 weeks without any reason. It's up to 6 months on tenuous medical and psychological grounds. Okay, so there's a ground C in the UK, which 97% of abortions take place under. And as I said earlier, the law in the UK is just a rubber stamp. Okay, people, doctors sign pro formas without even examining their patients. So most of the abortions, if it occurs over here in the Republic, will be on healthy babies of healthy mothers for no reason whatsoever. And as John alluded to there, it can actually be up to 9 months, up to term, an abortion up to term, okay, if the baby is diagnosed, accurately or not, with some sort of physical impairment. I think that's correct, isn't it, John? Yeah. And also, I just was listening to a colleague there earlier today. He said that 40% of all abortions under 12 weeks in the UK are actually surgical. They're actually surgical abortions, which means they're actually injecting potassium chloride into the heart of the child and dismembering the child. Okay, so this is not a clean solution, as Harrison Varadkar and all the other ministers up in the government are letting have you believe. It's a dirty business.
Amen.
I
Yeah.
just want to add something to that because there's a very important point here. What you're referring to in general there is the fact that there is a bill being prepared for the aftermath, which the government tells us that they will put in place. But that is not part of the referendum. That will not be part of what we vote on, and will never be part of any package that the courts will in the future consider with regard to understanding the mindset of the people when they voted on this measure. The only thing that they will have will be the wording in the Constitution. And that wording in the Constitution will say, provision may be made by law for the regulation of termination of pregnancy. And that will be a fundamental right. Termination of pregnancy will be a fundamental right. There will be no impediment to that fundamental right of the mother from the baby, because the baby will have zero rights. Tabula rasa. It's a scorched earth for rights for the child if this is voted down. So there will be no impediment to stop any mother going to court at 8 months and 28 days and saying, I want to abort my child, and succeeding, because there will be no obstacle, and that will then become the law of the land. So it's a completely fraudulent proposal, because it is suggesting that there's some relevance in the 12 weeks, or in any other number of weeks. There is no relevance whatsoever constitutionally in any of that. A statute is like software. Constitution is hardware. We need to look at the Constitution and what it says, and that's why we have to vote this down completely in its entirety.
Hello. I'm a yes voter. Am I allowed to speak here?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I was a definite yes voter at the beginning of this campaign. Now I'm not absolutely certain that I'm going to vote yes. I may not vote at all. But in my conscience, and genuinely, I have a question there at the end of this. I just want to put it in the context, if I may, please. I couldn't, in conscience, vote no. But I'm not one of the abortion crowd, pro-abortion crowd, as some people would describe people who are going to vote yes. I think that's unfair and lack of respect. I was at a yes meeting hosted by Mick Wallace and Claire Daly in Enniscorthy sometime during the week, and the no people got a very respectful hearing, and I certainly welcome that. But I do have to say, I am vehemently opposed to 12 weeks abortion on demand. Vehemently opposed to that. Now, the reason I'm voting yes is because on compassionate grounds. I do believe there are compassionate reasons why, in very rare circumstances, that abortion should be permitted. Now, I do believe as well that the pro-life people are fighting the wrong battle, because I think it's inevitable, whether it's in this referendum, because if you vote no, you'll be asked to vote again. There's no doubt about that. We know that. So I think you're fighting the wrong battle. And I would like to see the middle ground Catholics, middle ground, not the hardline Catholics, join forces with people like myself and vehemently campaigning that when this referendum is repealed, if it is, I'm not so sure it will be, but if it's repealed, why doesn't the pro-life get together and, instead of, excuse the pun, throwing the baby out with the bathwater and rejecting abortion on all circumstances? That's an unrealistic aim. I think the pro-life could save many, many, many babies by forcing the government through the public representatives. And don't forget, in the Dáil, the public representatives are by and large pro-life. They're not going to vote for abortion on demand of 12 weeks, and I hope they don't. So I think that I'm asking the question, why doesn't the pro-life take a realistic view, which in my view would save many, many lives, and I know that the opposition to the abolition of the 8th Amendment is based on deeply religious conviction, largely Catholic. And that's fine. I respect that. Okay. May I just say, well, from the speakers it would seem, so I have no problem with that. In fact, I envy deeply religious Catholics as I approach my...
I think it will.
Yes, of course. But that conviction is driving the opposition, and it's implacable opposition to the abolition of the 8th Amendment. That's not realistic. So again, could I ask the question of the panel? Could you please consider, right, if the referendum is repealed by the democratic wishes of the Irish people, that you would get together with middle ground people to minimise the number of abortions that would occur in Ireland. Thank you very much.
You see, well, first of all, as the gentleman there said, this is not a religious question in the sense that you mean it. It's not that this is would that it were sometimes. Would that religious leaders would come out and speak on this matter from their own perspective. This has been left to lay people, and this has been left to ordinary citizens to create an opposition, politically and theologically as well. But in fact, it's not a religious issue in the sense you mean. If Christ had never come, what we're saying would be true.
Yeah.
But he did come, and if he was here, he would say he would be here. But you see, I don't accept the premise of your question that they will stop anywhere. There's no such thing. Even if we could accept a little bit of abortion, which, by the way, we already have, and all the issues that are being raised in a lot of ways are already covered by the 2013 Act. This is bogus. As I said, if you actually were to take up any one of the issues, you could actually have formulated a wording, or 4 different wordings, or 5 different wordings, which could have been added to Article 40.3.3, and leave it there. There are already 2 extra, the Travel Information Amendments of 1992. You could have added 3 or 4 more. Skillful lawyers would have no difficulty if we wanted to deal with what are called the hard cases, and we could have a debate on all of that. This will catch the 97% of children who don't fall into any of those categories, who are perfectly healthy children, who are wanted children. And by the way, this mechanism will destroy the rights of all children, unborn children in every context. Wanted children will be affected. Prenatal care will be affected. Indemnities in risk in deliveries will be very suspect in the future, very dubious if it can be sustained, because a firm like if you take an equivalent case to the one we recently had in the cervical check business, where you had an American firm being sued and having to pay out big lumps of money. I could see a case coming where they will say, well, you know, your child was damaged at birth, and you now have huge medical bills for the rest of that child's life. Well, sorry, but your child doesn't have any constitutional rights until it is born, so therefore we're not liable. And so this is actually a scorched earth, because the Supreme Court has already said the child has no other rights in the Constitution. This is really shocking. Now, so I don't accept the premise of several premises of your argument. I mean, I respect the question, and I admire you for standing up and asking it here. It's not an easy thing to do, and I respect that greatly. But I don't accept the premise of it, that they will stop anywhere. They want industrial abortion. They're telling lies when they say they're concerned about these hard cases. As I said, I give again the wording for a woman's, the so-called supposed risk to the life of the mother. The wording I would propose would be this, and I could come up with a little bit of time with wordings for all the others as well. Nothing in this Constitution shall be invoked to prevent a medical practitioner intervening to save the life of a mother. End of story. No more debate. So they're not honest. Fundamentally, I ask you this, look at the 3 key practitioners in government, the Taoiseach, the Minister for Health and the Taoiseach, and look at their journey in a matter of days after going into office, and ask them, are these men honest? No. We cannot trust these people. We cannot trust them with anything. They're out with grins on their faces, campaigning, as if they were like, in some kind of council election, when they are campaigning for the right to kill children. It's an obscenity. And we cannot deal with these people. In my view, as Trevor said, or somebody said, and I hope it happens, that when these people are hopefully trounced in this vote on Friday, that we say, please, leave now. You have disgraced yourself and us.
Just in relation to that question, sir, I mean, to be honest, it sounds like you're trying to convince yourself in relation to this matter as well, with due respect. I mean, the lawyers that said their statements there last Friday week, they addressed your very concerns that you are espousing there tonight. They said it was open to the government to amend the article in the Constitution instead of repealing it, to deal with the difficult cases, and to introduce legislation which solely addressed those exceptional cases. They didn't do that. They didn't do that. So that's the answer to your question. Instead, they yielded to pressure from extremists who wanted to sweep away the rights of the unborn completely and introduce a wide-ranging right to abortion. So that is your question answered. This is not about the exceptional cases. This is about abortion of healthy babies, of healthy mothers. Now, and I'll just go further on. There's a lady there, Vanessa Taylor. She's a barrister, and she said that while she respected the views of those who thought that abortion was never acceptable, she herself would have voted yes had the proposals been limited to exceptional cases. Instead, she said the only way to stop a profound injustice was to join her colleagues in urging a no vote.
I've been on the doors, met people who looked me in the eye and were understanding that they were talking about murder and they did not care. Now, I want to ask the doctors here, what do they think of abortionists? What about their mentality?
Who has the right to execute the most defenceless, the most innocent, and the purest of us all? Katrina?
I just want to speak in relation to this man's invitation to middle ground Catholics or Christians. In fact, it's because people take a middle ground that we have this referendum. Christians, Catholics, should heed the 5th commandment, which is, thou shalt not kill. No question. And it's middle ground thinking that has us in this situation today.
Hello, good evening. John, I appreciate your perspectives because I do actually think, having read a little bit, I think you're really on the ball because it is opening up a much bigger door than I would have really realised 2 or 3 weeks ago. Just from talking to people, one of the big issues that does sort of hit them when you're on doorsteps is this whole thing of the differing of doctors' opinions. And I'm just kind of curious, in order to understand, because generally I think most people come to debates honestly and of their own conviction. And I'm curious why our doctors might think that various obstetricians in Ireland have presented a very different view than we hear tonight, and that I would kind of hold. Like, why are they trying to convince people that women's lives are at risk? Have they had a different experience? Are they agenda driven? If they are honest and good doctors, how can we kind of understand where they're coming from? Because it's much easier then to discuss and debate it with people when you kind of have the context where they're coming from, because it is confusing.
You have to be brave to stand. I think the Institute has 5 pillars of previous chairmen who have brought governance, risk management, training, and the Institute is 50 years old and is a brand of safety and excellence. The mortality in Ireland, 6.8 per 100,000. The mortality in the UK is 8.5 per 100,000. The mortality in the US of A is 26.2 per 100,000. I can assure you Ireland is safe. Obstetricians are mediaphobic. We worry what people think about us. We worry about our private practice. We worry about how we present ourselves in society. There are a lot of obstetricians that would like to speak out, but they're scared. I'm not one of them.
I just add to that point that I think is very important, in relation to the media aspect of this. If these obstetricians felt that in going on media, they were going to be subjected to hard questioning, as we are, and vicious questioning in many instances, they wouldn't, I don't think, be so fond of making generalizations and saying vague things. Look, for example, there's a very clear question you can ask an obstetrician if you're an interviewer. And that is, okay, doctor, can you provide me with a list of all the women who have died in your care as a result of your inability to care for them properly as a result of the Eighth Amendment? How many women are we talking about who were died, whose deaths were your responsibility in that context? And the answer to that is none.
Yeah.
None. Anywhere. And nobody's ever asked that question. No journalist in a media studio has ever asked that question. And obstetricians go into those studios know they will not be asked those questions. We had a disgraceful episode the other day on the Pat Kenny show where an obstetrician who had disgraced himself on TV the night before was allowed a soft run for half an hour. No hard questions. This is a common experience. I had an experience today with media, Mr. Dunphy, who set me up for a scalping, and I walked out not without someone joined us. So that's the way it goes. But it comes down to when you're aware that there is a corrupt media who will favour your position always. You can say what you like.
Good evening, everyone. Joe Barton, Parallel C, and I just want to make a comment. That's what and be short. We've done away with the death penalty in our country for criminals, and now we're bringing it back for the innocents. Yes.
Hi, can I just ask, say if we're taking away the constitutional protection of the child in relation to if a person is happily pregnant and then somebody evil comes along and gives them an abortion pill and they don't realise what it is or something like that, and then the child is killed, in their womb, that wouldn't be then criminally murder, that would maybe just be assault, or, I'm just wondering how that would affect that baby.
It's a really interesting question legally, and I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I've talked to many lawyers in the court over the past 6 months and gone through a lot of these issues, and what I'm hearing back is that, there will not be a criminal offence of any kind. I mean, it will depend on if the mother, for example, is assaulted, then there will be a common assault or a previous bodily harm or whatever. If the baby is killed, there is no additional charge, as it were. Because the baby will have no rights whatsoever after Article 43.3 is eliminated if it is. At the moment, obscenely, the Supreme Court on March the 7th in Limerick said that the child had no other rights in the Constitution, which is really contrary to innumerable judgments down the years by very much better judges that I can tell you that were on the Supreme Court on that day. The idea of it in our society, that in 1937 the people of Ireland never thought that the child in the womb, their son to be, their daughter to be, their granddaughter, that these were not human beings, that they were not like us, that they were not entitled to protection. That this is what the court is telling us, that we never thought of that. And that in 1983 there was lots of other stuff we didn't think of either. And the media again don't report or don't query. There's no analysis of this. No investigation of this. But if it was even the slightest point, like using a 4-letter word now as a criminal offence, it seems in media terms, but actually no matter what you say in relation to all of this stuff, will not be reported by anybody because it doesn't suit. I think we need to start paying attention to all kinds of stuff here because our country has been stolen from under us. Just want to say I've done some canvassing in Dublin, mostly in working class areas, and I would say that it would be 70% pro-life. It's a marked difference in wealthier areas. It seems to be like a thing that it's kind of like the progressive thing to do. But just on what I've discovered is most of the Yes campaign, it's very soft. It's going after people who haven't really made up their minds. And when you quiz people on it, they actually are pro-life. They will tell you that it's the extreme examples and it's the hard cases, and they're actually telling you they're compassionate voting yes, but they're actually saying they're pro-life. So what I'm saying to everybody here, just keep talking to people, because believe it or not, most people, I would say, will vote no, but they're telling people they're voting yes because it's the trendy left-wing thing to do. And just an aside, John, I've actually got a subscription to an old magazine of yours, Hot Press, and I swear to God, it's the worst rant in the rag. Of course, it's just brilliant.
I'm a nurse up in Wexford Hospital here, and me and many of my colleagues will not be taking part in any abortions. And it's not just nurses and doctors, it's the portering staff, the theatre attendants, the housekeeping staff don't want any part of it either. So I'd just like to ask the doctors about how bad things would get for staff regarding conscience objection or lack of it, or lack of clarity about it.
I'll have to retire. I won't do it. I won't sacrifice my soul.
Just in case we're in any doubt as to the position that healthcare workers will be placed in, there was a recent Supreme Court decision in Glasgow where two midwives brought a case to the Supreme Court in the UK as to their conscientious objection to participating in abortion, including supervising abortions. Would you believe the Supreme Court actually held against them and said that they were obliged to supervise abortion? So effectively, the conscientious objection has been slowly eroded away, even in our nearest common law jurisdiction. And I have no faith that if the referendum is, if the AFA is repealed, that we will have conscientious objection in this country. And that will affect everybody. That will affect everybody. That will affect healthcare workers, non-healthcare workers. That will affect porters who have to clean up after their abortions. That will affect GPs if a lady comes in and I am obliged, if the lady comes in and tells me I'm 11 weeks pregnant, I cannot even say I don't have anything to do with this. According to, I think it's head 15 of the drafts of the bill, I'm obliged to refer her on to a colleague who will abort the child. I'm obliged to refer this lady to someone who I knew will take the life of one of my patients. It's an absolute disgrace.
Hello everybody. I've come here tonight as an undecided voter. I'm leaning a little bit towards no. I'm still undecided. I just want to know, as a mother of a daughter who's 23, in the future, if any of you can answer me, if the 8th Amendment is retained, should I as a mother be worried about my daughter if she becomes pregnant and her health is affected by complications of her pregnancy, her health and her life?
I want to assure you that Irish obstetrics is safe. We're leaders in the world when it comes to safety. The 8th Amendment does not enter my head. We are very much involved in labour suite protocols where we've got drills, we've got hemorrhage drills, septic drills. We take on evidence-based medicine and we do perform to a very high standard. So I want to completely assure you that Irish obstetrics is safe.
I'd like to compliment our four speakers, John, Bernadette, Trevor and Ronan, for their wonderful contributions tonight. I sometimes wonder, how did we get to this position? Are we asleep at the wheel? And the question of creeping abortion or incremental attitudes that lead to abortion, I have very little sympathy for that, because that's what happens with many evils. You don't hear people talking about abortion. They use all kinds of euphemisms, as you so rightly said, that they have to dress it up as something else, and by the time we wake up, we're in an area, a nightmare land. We have a very good crowd here tonight, so I'd like to ask the panelists, maybe each of them, is there one thing that they'd recommend that we individually or collectively could do in the last remaining week of the campaign?
We'll take one or two more questions after this. It's getting a little bit late, so that's what people want. But now we'll leave the answer to that question.
I would stress that it's abortion on demand for a normal, healthy baby, less than 12 weeks. I would stress that. I don't think the public realise that. This is not about the hard cases. And I think if that's the single sentinel point, that this is abortion on demand. And a British-style system up to 24 weeks.
I would say that as of this time, every day I get calls of distress from women deeply, deeply damaged by abortion. And if any of you were to sit in on one of my weekends and listen to the suffering and the pain and the heartache of those who regret their abortions, and many of these women would have been pro-choice prior to that abortion, I would say to you, I'm just terrified. I won't be able to keep up the demand. I already can't. My weekends are booked out in advance if there's nobody affected by abortion. So I would plead with you, keep talking to people, keep getting yourself informed. You've heard all of the answers here tonight. Abortion kills an innocent unborn child and deeply damages the mother. Many of those poor mothers can't have babies now. Many of those women are carrying that pain for 30 and 40 years. We're human beings. Of course we're going to suffer the guilt and the grief and the shame. So please, keep talking to people, keep knocking on doors, keep changing hearts. But as I said, this is the only chance we're going to get in the next few weeks.
I suppose the advice I would give, just from a practical point of view, is if you know neighbours, friends, people living alone out in the country, to offer lifts to get the vote out. Okay. So, and also to make them understand the nature of the ballot paper. It's not a tick; it's a cross. It's a cross on the no. Okay. So, I mean, people often sometimes go into a referendum and, like, I have to educate. It's not even educate, but I have to remind myself, or even remind my mother and father, or remind my other half, like, you have to put the cross. You have to put the cross on the ballot paper. Otherwise, they will use any means whatsoever, okay, to reduce the no vote. Okay, so you have to be clinical about it. You have to put the cross on the no vote. You have to give your elderly neighbours, okay, a lift to the ballot station. You have to remind people to vote. We need to get the vote out. It needs to be a strong cohort of no voters. Okay, so that's my advice.
What I would say to people is to stress and to be clear about this, the unprecedented nature of this proposal. In every other jurisdiction that abortion came in general, apart from I think Switzerland, where there was a referendum, it came in either by statute or by legal fiat, as in the United States and in Britain. In Switzerland, it was merely an addition to the existing abortion, so it's not quite the same thing in that sense, but it's also not quite the same thing in another sense, as I said earlier. This is the striking down of the fundamental protection, the protected right to life. So that's us saying, you will die. We are exposing the children to death by our votes if we vote yes. So this never happened in history. Not even the Nazis succeeded in persuading the German people, for all they appalling aspects of that situation, that they could vote down the rights of the Gypsies or the Jews. They didn't succeed in doing that. I ask us, can we look each other in the eye after this if it happens? Can we look at each other? Can we talk to each other about anything meaningful? We will have to become atomized. We will have to be treating to ourselves to hide from this and to hide from each other's gaze if this happens. And every time we see a child, all we can think is this one escaped. This one got away by some miracle. So like, and the reason that this extraordinary, you might, I know that you will perhaps have a nagging doubt which you may not be able to articulate if you're halfway home, is if this were true, if what John Waters said is true, surely you would have heard about it somewhere else. No. Because of the corruption of the media, again, you will not have heard about it. And this corruption, I wanted to slightly correct something John inadvertently said earlier when he introduced me, because he said that I was the editor of a new website called frontpage.org. I was very briefly. But I resigned on May the 8th because it was made clear to me that the publishers did not want to promote a no vote in this contest. And I said, well, bye-bye. I'm not interested. But the articles we have written, myself and Bruce Arnold have written maybe half a dozen articles between us. And if you want to read in depth, particularly Bruce's, I have to say, in all sincerity and honesty, they're fundamentally great. And there are a couple of articles on there. If you go into frontpage.org and search, you need to find the links. But if you get to mine, you might be able to get to Bruce's. And there's an article called, if you do a search for The Devil in the Small Print by Bruce Arnold. Just read that one. And you will understand the absolute shocking nature of what is proposed by what purports to be our government, not my government. Not my teaching.
Good evening, and thank you for organising this meeting. I'd just like to make a bullet comment. I saw that a doctor who spoke to the Citizens' Assembly, he had been an abortionist in America, and he spoke to them and he said, the bodies of the dead children are being used in the furnaces of the hospitals in the States to heat the hospitals, and I think that's very relevant. Thank you.
Just canvassing out in the last week, 3 ladies told me very convincingly that friends of theirs had to carry a baby dead in their womb for months. And I think that's wrong, but yet they're very convinced, oh no, it was my friend and it was from 7 months to 9. So could you give us the actual answer? What happens in Ireland if the baby dies?
Yeah.
Thank you.
If the baby dies, first of all, the diagnosis has to be made by 2 separate doctors. So 2 separate senior doctors. So 2 consultants will scan the baby and do a Doppler and check, is there any blood flow? And then we have a diagnosis of death. We then obviously tell the patient, and which is a shock, and it's really quite a terrible roller coaster for the couple. And I would bring them back in a day or 2 because they'll go home destroyed, and they'll need a contact number, they'll need a bereavement midwife to contact, and I generally give the patient my mobile number, and I consistently take care of that patient until the baby is born. So you then induce labour. So you give the patient tablets and you prime the cervix, and 2 or 3 days later the baby is born. We do not let the baby in situ because there's a risk of sepsis, and there's the psychological trauma, the emotional trauma. So You care for the patient. You listen to the patient. You give a little bit of yourself. You give some compassion. And you deliver the baby.
Sorry, could I just add to that, to the very simple point that may be missed, that if the baby is dead, Article 40.3.3 is no longer operable in any concept, any way whatsoever. It has nothing to do with Article 43.3 once the baby is dead. So that's another fallacy that's going around.
Sorry, just a brief follow-up point to that. Was it possible that in the past that process may have been more protracted up to the order of a month?
I think the new drugs are far more proactive about inducing labour. I think in the past they may have been somewhat restricted by the texture nature of the cervix. So they didn't have the drugs. And it's obviously quite difficult to do a caesarean section on a baby that's dead. And I have done a caesarean section on a baby that's dead. And when that baby comes out, there's such a deafening silence in that theatre.
Any more questions?
Just one.
Just hopefully in the event that the no vote win, has the government got a fallback position where they'll go back to the people and try and get a referendum on amending the 8th?
No, they don't, that's a good thing. This government should just stop and desist from all this and leave us in peace.
Hello, I'm asking this question on behalf of my friend here as well. And on the doorstep and the yes vote leaflets and things, Savita Halapanava, her photograph and the case about her always comes up as a reason for having abortion. And we know from the reports that the fact that she didn't have an abortion there was lack of care. So it brings into question the level of care. So, like, can a case like Savita happen again?
Savita Habernara was a tragedy. A young girl died, husband lost his wife. The midwives and doctors in Galway were deeply traumatised. Savita Habernara was unrecognised sepsis. Septicemia, is a silent killer. The monitoring wasn't up to standard. The reaction to the lack of monitoring wasn't there. What should have happened should have been a cascade of antibiotics, multidisciplinary involvement involving the microbiologist, hematologist and anaesthetist. She should have been transferred to a place of safety such as ICU. These things did not happen. Since the Savita case, a document has entered the labour ward. It's called the iMuse. And this is a document that is filled out by the midwives and the doctors. And at each level of her pulse, blood pressure, temperature, white cell count, lactate, all these levels are entered into this document. And there is a diagram for each event with each positive result. So Ireland is safer because of Savita. I think Savita's case was used, and that was a shame. It's a shame for that poor girl and that family, and it's a shame for Ireland.
Okay, I think that's there are no more questions, so we'll wind it up for now. And I've an announcement to make here first for, as I didn't introduce myself, my name is John Mullins and I'm the chairperson of the County Wexford Pro-Life campaign. Next weekend, the County Wexford Pro-Life campaign will distribute pro-life or vote no leaflets at every church after every Mass on both Saturday and Sunday for the coming weekend. We've prepared bags of leaflets that are down on the right-hand side. So if anybody would like to take one of those bags with them to their church, then it'll save us having to distribute them around the diocese. So if you could please see Elizabeth down in the back right there and take a bag for your church. And then organise with somebody. 2 people will be sufficient to hand them out as people come out from the church. So that's the coming weekend. Also, I'll just conclude now. There's a few things will come up when I conclude. As I say, we've had excellent presentations here. We have covered all sides of it, from the constitutional to the medical to the poor women that have suffered. And they are the people that really we should be thinking about, in addition to our unborn children. Women that have been conned basically into thinking that this was a quick solution, no problems, but unfortunately, as Bernadette has found, that is absolutely not the case. So I'd like to thank the speakers for making such efforts. I mean, they're extremely busy to come and talk to us. They're in demand all over the country. So I thank them for that. I would like to thank you, the audience. You have been excellent and far more than I could expect. I thought if we could, 80 seats, I thought, well, at least if we got 40 or 50, it wouldn't look too bad. But as I say, thank you very, very much. It just shows the interest that's out there, and people want to find out what is really happening. And I think tonight you will have done that from our excellent speakers. I'd like to thank the Talbot Hotel. As I say, they have been very good. They've looked after us, given us a lovely room. Unlike some of the hotels earlier on in the year, who had to cancel pro-life events because of people threatening their staff. That hasn't happened here. The Talbot Hotel has staged this for us, and we're very happy with that. And I'd like to thank them. Now, Dr. Cleary has brought a number of leaflets which are published by Doctors for Life. I would earnestly ask you all to take one, read it. It will reinforce what you've already heard here this evening. And if you need any further references, you can look it up. And one quotation or one definition I read out from this document that the government have said they're going to bring in, which is called General Scheme of a Bill to Regulate Termination of Pregnancy. And this is the definition for the termination of pregnancy. Termination of pregnancy means a medical procedure which is intended to end the life of the fetus. That's the definition. There's no scope there for anything else. It's clear it's to end the life of the fetus. So just bear that in mind. And now, I'm just looking here at the voting paper that you get, which is in everybody's the referendum you got. There is nothing on that little bit of paper to say anything about removing the 8th Amendment. It's an innocuous little piece of paper that says, do you approve of the proposal to amend the Constitution contained in the undermentioned bill? It doesn't give you the words of the 8th Amendment. It doesn't tell you what they're going to do. It just says, do you approve of the proposal to amend the Constitution contained in the undermentioned bill, 36th Amendment of the Constitution Bill 2018? Please mark in one square only. If you approve, mark X. If you do not approve, mark X. That to me is a totally misleading document and designed for confusion. So, as Dr. Cleary said, make sure that you mark it with an X, and it's the last box, the bottom box. So, I would appeal to every one of you, as I did earlier, to make sure you get out, make sure your neighbours are able to get out, and vote to save our country. Basically, as John says, take it back from what appears to be, well, you've heard. Now, with that, as I say, there's a cup of tea and a cup of coffee at the back for anybody who would like it. I'd like to wish our speakers a safe journey home and thank them once again. I can't thank you enough for your contribution to it. If it's only for your sakes, I hope that we will beat this out of the water. Thank you all very, very much.